In Debs, Alison Pill plays a quantum physics designer at a tech company that has figured out how to see forwards and backwards in time. That's a really simplified version of what this show actually is, because we could literally spend hours talking about it, but I will not do that to you all. I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby. I'm here with Alison Pill. Alison, I found Debs to be really moving, thought-provoking, experience about grief and motivation and fate, and it had a lot to unpack. When all is said and done, what did you take away from it personally and from your experience on the show?
A whole lot. I mean, I took experiences from the making of it. I took the fantastic world of quantum physics with me, which I got a chance to delve, even scratch the surface of. It will truly blow your mind, the thoughts that minds can have. And then I think the bigger question, which so much art is sort of, I don't know if it's, if we're all scared to pose it. I think as people, we're sort of scared to pose these giant existential questions generally, but when the art is particularly well suited to those questions, I think you can take them in a different way. And I definitely took in those questions of existence, determinism, free will, infinity, the spooky action at a distance, quantum ability to be both and nothing, like, you know.
It's mind-numbing. There's so much there to grasp onto. And then not only do we have this macro level, but on the more kind of granular level, like I understood Forrest, the CEO, his motivations, because we eventually realised he's suffering from this suffocating grief and guilt over the tragic death of his wife and child. But for Katy, I felt she was way more ambiguous, and I'm still weighing up what her real true motivations were. What do you think drove her ambition to create this machine?
I think first and foremost, when Forrest poses a question, she's a scientist. And once a question is posed to that kind of mind, you need to know the answer. That's just the way her mind works. It's like, would that be a possibility? It is a distinct, philosophical possibility. Would it be a literal possibility? Like, can I put my philosophy to the test? Can I put my belief in determinism, which is so much a part of Katy? I do believe she's a true believer in determinism. I don't think she has a single doubt in her head that what happens is caused by prior events, that everything can be determined by a previous occurrence. And so to have the resources and the power to be able to put that to a test, I think is the most honestly exciting thing she's ever been asked to do. At the same time, I think her motivations change, which you get to see a little more in flashback with, I think she's just an incredibly generous human. I really do. I think she's the most generous person there, because she just does it out of the goodness of her heart to help Forrest. There's I really don't think there's much beyond the selfish drive to answer a question. I don't think there's a great deal of selfishness in her motivations.
Yeah, that's so important to understand ultimately about her. And I'm going to try to get this out without spitting over my words, because it's really complicated for me to try to put into words what I feel about Katy, because I spend a lot of the time watching you and playing her reserved, closed off, like she's hiding something. And it's effective because it makes us feel ambivalent about her. And then I'm wondering, as the performer, because we end up finding out she's super empathetic and emotional and caring, very, very deeply emotional person, but you're playing her initially duplicitous, maybe, but knowing that ultimately she's not actually a bad person. How difficult is that to play those nuances?
I mean, the biggest question, and this is a bit of a spoiler, I guess, but the biggest question for us in any scene is, has Katy seen this one before? Has she watched this before?
Yeah.
So imagining the entirely surreal experience of living through a moment that you've seen. it's like a very strange, it's something that you don't get to think about often, but it's not deja vu. It's a very conscious, like, I'm about to say this, I know I'm about to say this, here I'm saying it. And so in all of those moments, all of the work with stillness, because I came into Katy through her stillness and her posture, because I think the awareness of every action having been predetermined at that point means that you have to be really, like, you're not just like rubbing your nose and doing this all the time, because
Yeah.
because you know when you always knew. Here's the other thing, is that you never got to experience that moment without having
What does that
seen
do?
it. Well, that's the question of, like, that everything has to be incredibly conscious. And there's some stuff that she hadn't seen, but a lot of the time, like, she's watching something, like she's watching an episode of TV she's seen before. So there's less emotion, because the second time you see something, you feel it a little less.
Yeah, it's intentional, but you could have fallen into a trap of being like complacent or arrogant or bored, going through the motions. You weren't doing that, and that's why it hurt my brain by the time we got to the second last episode. My tiny brain. And then you've got the highlight scene on the table. I know you've talked about this at length. Everyone wants to talk about you and Sonoya Mizuno, who plays Lily, with the pen, trying to explain the multiverse and this great concept of the multiverse being trial. So if it precludes free will, you're absolved, but if it doesn't work, you're guilty and you're damned. That really resonated with me. I'd never really thought of that before. What are your thoughts on that whole concept and doing that scene?
I think, again, it's there are very few times that you get to play somebody with huge certainty. And she feels really certain that her view of the universe is the correct one. She has sneaking suspicions about the multiverse, but more importantly, the fact that that her moral view is more, morality is very complicated in a deterministic universe, because if you are always going to do a bad thing, how can you be blamed for it? And so her belief that Forrest could be helped, I think she really does start to feel compassion and empathy for this person suffering through the loss of his wife and daughter, and really feels the need to say, it's not your fault and I can prove it to you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that. And I'm also wondering, obviously you're part of the show, but if you remove yourself as a consumer of it, reviewer of it, what did you feel about this machine that can see back and forth? Because I was so entranced by that idea. It really hit me and I didn't expect it. Episode 3, we see this grainy image of Christ on the cross. I'm not religious at all, and yet I was just like dumbfounded, honestly. What about you? How did you feel about it? And what would you want to see?
I wouldn't want to see anything, I don't think.
Yeah.
I really, it's such a, what a weapon.
Yeah.
And especially in a world that, by no means do we have an everything machine, but we do have an awful lot of data out there available about us. Locations, likes,
Oof.
all of that stuff that's just out there and owned by someone that could very easily be weaponized. I mean, that already exists.
Pretty much.
So like, I don't think it's great to have private ownership of that amount of information. To have a machine, to have an everything machine that could tell you what any person at any point in history did, do, or was doing. It's the same thing with surveillance of any sort, where you're like, yeah, you're right. That does seem like it would make people behave better, but it's like, what does that do to a society?
Yeah.
What does a government do with that everything machine? Like, what would the US government do? Like, I mean, it just, it's I don't think I want to see anything.
Probably safer. I think you're right, actually. The other scene that I wanted to raise, I'm sure people will talk about this one too, is the scene at the dam with Landon played by Katy. That was very heartbreaking, nerve-wracking, because Katy is a very caring, empathetic person, but there's not much she can do because her belief system is what comes first, and so Landon has to die. What was that scene like to shoot? Was it particularly challenging?
It was for a few different reasons. Our dam was, like, we shot it over 2 days. The location was difficult to reach, very sunny, all of those long shots on cranes. I mean, it was really Kaylee and I in the middle of this dam. So there wasn't, the sun is blazing and we're just, and I just throughout the whole day, I was like, oh God, everybody's going to hate me. I mean, I love Kaylee to bits. We just had a Talking Heads dance party the other day with my daughter and her, and she's incredible. And I love that. I think this goes back to that. Whenever we rehearsed it, it was just like two scientific minds meeting. There's nothing more exciting than being able to prove a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and also the fact that at this point it's been proven just by the experiment of how the computer works, that the multiverse is real.
Yeah.
So there are near infinite variations. That's been proven by the machine. So the fact remains, it is deterministic. I was always going to say, you climb over the edge. I never tell you that. And in all the versions that she would have watched, there are times when she stays up.
Yeah.
Like there are, it's just a different worldview. Trying to think about, if you think about infinity and that was where I sent my mind a lot in scenes where I wasn't talking a lot. I just think about infinity and what that concept actually means. Yeah. We don't, like, trying to do math on infinity. Our brains can't comprehend it. Like we've talked about, Alex's second novel was The Tesseract, and even thinking of it, which is a 4-dimensional object, and trying to imagine a 4-dimensional object I'm just like, my brain just goes, yeah. And the same thing with infinity. So trying to picture a multiverse where literally the branching out occurs at every single moment, like the weight of one death in one universe, where in the other universe Lyndon climbs back over, he comes back to work at Devs, and there you have it. The knowledge that's like both of them have that knowledge as scientists.
Yeah.
And that is thrilling to them.
Yeah, and you can see that. It's a pretty special scene. Speaking of Alex Garland, I'm sure you're as big a fan of him as I am, and you got the pleasure of working with him. He brings along these army of collaborators, designers, musicians, artists. He's a very collaborative person, and I love that about him. But the vision is so unique and audacious. The work Mark Lee and Michelle Day did in that bunker, the work of the Insects, Jeff Barrow, Ben Salisbury did on the score. What was your take on the visual and oral aesthetic of the show? Because it's very unique. Everything about it was perfect. I think the music choices, and Alex did know a few of the, like the opening choral piece in the first episode, he did have. Man, the best fight scene ever in the parking lot, that song over it. I mean, my God. I think it's very rare to see both score and original music used so effectively. And I'll never forget the first time we walked into the Cube and Rob set some of the light cues, and which we shot at the end. They built it in Manchester, and so it was at the very end we shot the entirety of the Cube. It was just such a magical, weird space to be in, sort of in the casino way of, you don't know what time it is outside. It was, it's Manchester in January, so it's probably rainy and gray.
but there was something, so there's still, I mean, just being in there and then being in that velvet room, being in the screening room, like if there's this hushed atmosphere, it's small. We really couldn't have that much crew in there.
Yeah.
And operating in that, like trying to figure out how to use the bench, the window seats, like how to operate in that very simple space was really exciting. And we were able to play with all of it. And as you say, Alex is, I mean, it's not his only strength, but it is an impressive strength in somebody that smart and talented to be as good a collaborator as he is.
Yeah.
Because I think it was just a joyful experience to come to work every single day.
That's so nice to hear, because, you know, it doesn't happen every day.
No.
It doesn't. But
it really doesn't.
It really doesn't. And that's not just for performers and people in the arts. It's everybody. If you work and you love the people and you like doing what you're doing, good luck to you, mate. You're killing it.
Yeah.
Let's shift to Picard before we go, because as a ridiculous sci-fi nerd like myself, I grew up with Captain Picard, and I'm sure you probably did as well. Maybe.
Yes. Yes, sir.
That was my first TV.
He's my captain.
That's right. Oh. He's mine too. Like, I'm obsessed with TV now. It's my job. But back then, when I was a kid, that was my obsession. And to be out, like, I know I've met Patrick Stewart, is lovely, but you worked with him, and what was that like, to idolize someone as a kid and then actually work with the guy?
He's the best. He's just the best. I've been so lucky, and having worked on other things every TV show is hectic for different reasons, and there's never enough time, and there's always stress. But these two, I've just never, it feels so easy, and like being part of an ensemble, and every one of whom I appreciate. So yes, Patrick is incredible. And part of the reason is, again, the same reason that Alex is incredible, is the collaboration. And Patrick came in saying, like, he didn't want though the show is called Picard, he didn't want it to just be, he wants to be part of an ensemble. He comes from, RSC, like ensemble company work. And so he wants a company. And that is, to have somebody so humble and welcoming and generous, and smart and funny. It's a joy. It's a real, like, we get to play on a spaceship. We did reshoots, and it was just Patrick and I on the spaceship, a few months after we'd finished, and just getting some pickup shots. And I was just like, I have the best job. I'm on a pretend spaceship with Patrick Stewart, and I'm like, beep boop, beep boop, and I'm both like, I'm like, beep boop, beep boop, and he's like, beep boop. I'm like, I fly the spaceship, beep boop. It's just so fun.
Yes, what a dream.
Truly, yeah.
So lucky. And then you're playing Dr. Agnes, right? And she's a morally questionable character. That's interesting to me. She's, spoiler alert, she's killed someone. She's seen some stuff in the Romulan world that has made her kind of PTSD, suicidal, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to spoil it too much. But she's a really extreme character. Is that fun, to just kind of go balls to the wall with someone like her?
Oh, yeah. Melodrama is great. So good. It's so fun. And we also had wonderful people writing where it walks that line. It's really fun to play, and it's a very plot-driven show, but it's really fun to do, to be like, hiding stuff, and then throwing yourself around the lab and foaming at the mouth, and then like, I'm sorry, like all of the, it's so fun. I love acting. I really do. And so to have something so balls to the wall, and also to get to do some like funnier comedy moments, and just like have that mix, and it's just really fun. It's just the most fun. We laugh an insane amount on that show, and I couldn't be happier being a part of that company.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. And really, congrats on a really great season of TV, Alison, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Everybody go to Gold Derby, make a prediction, click subscribe, and watch all of our great contender chats just like this one.